Welcome to the People's First podcast, where we dive deep into conversations with remarkable individuals who are shaping the landscape of leadership and innovation. Today, we have the privilege of hosting Erik Reyes, the ANZ Regional Director of Thales Cloud Protection and Licensing. Eric, with over 15 years in the Australian IT industry, particularly in cybersecurity, what drew you to this field initially?
Funny story. Actually, got back from my gap year. Didn't really know what I wanted to do at the time, but knew that, I didn't want to be in the back office. So, looked around, found an in-between job dealing with Antivirus. And I'm like, what is this cybersecurity business? No worries, I'll do this for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Then 15 years later, Here we are. Right, so it's one of those interesting ones, because I grew up going, you know what, I'm going to be an accountant or I'm going to be a programmer, because I like both numbers and IT, right? And going, let's work on that. Let's figure out what it's going to be. Traveled for a bit, came back to Australia, and then realized, hang on, it's either going to be one or the other.
Yeah,
I can't do both.
Yeah,
let's take another gap. In other words, find a job that's in between while we decide and figure it out. But I think in finding that in-between job, I found some really good people that mentored me along the way and really shaped where I wanted to go, and, gave me an idea of what could be. And then for myself, realized that I wanted to do something that actually impacted people.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think a lot of people really want to find something that will be meaningful to them, but also to the people around them as well. I mean, what did you understand about cybersecurity when you first kind of got into the job?
Wow, that was that's a good question. What I understood it to be was antivirus, right? Let's protect from viruses. And there was a movie at the time when I was in high school, I think, called Hackers.
Yeah.
So I was like, maybe fighting against those guys, something like that.
Yeah.
But I arrived in this office. It was quite different from what I was seeing. There was a lot of young people and a lot of older gents and ladies just talking amongst themselves and about, what's happening in the economy. And I'm like, how is that even relevant to what we do? Right? And that's when the wheels started turning, going, you know what, this is probably a good mixture of what I wanted around numbers and around technology, and how what we do will impact or add value to people out there. So my understanding of cybersecurity back at the time was, hey, let's stop your computer from crashing.
Yep.
And that was it.
And let's stop these bad guys from putting a virus on your computer.
So it was very rudimental, and I had no idea what it was until I started digging into it and going, hey, there's something to this, and there's a reason people are being drawn to this.
Yeah. And then, I mean, throughout your career, there's probably key moments that you could draw on that taught you about what your leadership style would be in this current role. I mean, can you think of anything in particular?
Wow. Okay. There was one 10 years ago now, I think, when I first got promoted into a larger leadership role, right? So basically the role was to start a business unit that managed our Asia Pacific Tier 2 organization. So we wanted to be a bit hands-off and let the business do its thing. We're innovating at the time, going, hey, let's outsource this. There's some stuff in the internet, not cloud. No one knew what the cloud was back then, and neither did we. So
it was clouds in the sky,
so clearly we called it the internet. But it worked out that I needed to actually spend more time with people, right? In planning to do less, we actually ended up going, okay, we need to prepare people on how to engage, how to talk, and be able to communicate along long distances, right? So we were outsourcing to Asia, right? And we're in Sydney, so we're like, okay, language barrier, firstly, right?
Yes.
And then the tyranny of distance, right? And then time zones and all those things. So we had to effectively work around that in a small team in Australia. And for me, that really shaped how I organized my time and how I wanted to, in as little time as possible, impart what I need to, communicate more effectively, and be succinct in the messaging so that people can understand and deliver what they need to.
And I hear as well, it's so important when it comes to storytelling, when you're talking to the C-suite as well, and to be able to communicate in IT language to them too. I mean, what kind of skills did you find that you had to kind of employ to be able to do that?
That's, you know what, there was growing up, I used to watch a lot of late night TV. Parents hated it. They were like,
didn't we all?
Who's keeping us up? Oh, that guy. But no, it was a lot of Letterman, you know, and I think for me, the way he conducted interviews pretty much shaped how I spoke to people.
Yeah,
right?
wow.
So did a lot of, you know, analysis on how he did things, right? So some of the questions he would ask kind of resonated. And the storytelling part of it was important, right, for me to be able to impart the value of the organization I work for to the audience, right? Because, if you don't have a story, how are people going to relate, right? So for us, it's like you have to elevate the speak so much that you don't need to use jargon, right? Because as soon as you start speaking cybersecurity jargon, it's harder trying to understand IT stuff, right?
Yeah.
So when you go to cyber and then you're talking to a C-suite or even just a guy at the barbecue and they go, "What do you do, Eric?" And I'm like, okay.
How long have you got?
Yeah. So you pretty much have to compress that into 30 seconds and say the most important things are A, B, C.
Yep.
And that's what we do.
Yeah.
And if you want to go into more details, then we will, but we'll probably need to sit down for an hour.
Yeah. And I think there's this, kind of understanding of the idea of cybersecurity in the current space, because we see these recent major cybersecurity hacks with Medibank and Optus. I mean, how do you kind of work your way around people misunderstanding what cybersecurity is and also understanding how to protect themselves, but also their businesses as well?
It's a great question. I haven't been asked that all year. Well, it's only been 3 weeks, right? But
3 weeks is a long time when it comes to business.
It is. So for me, getting around that topic isn't, you know, black and white, right? Because basically when you look at those examples, you know, you try not to highlight those organizations because more often than not, it's not really their fault, right? You know, accidents happen to everyone. And the way I talk to people around cybersecurity is, you know, there's three important parts of it, right? There's people, there's technology, right? And, you know, process for businesses, but behavior for everyday people, right? So it's just being aware, right? So for me, growing up, curiosity has always been there, right? And that can go two ways, right? You can click the wrong thing when someone sends a message and you don't even know what it is, but you're curious, you want to know. That often leads to people getting attacked, right? So, you know, bad guys would prey on that, right? Because humans are naturally curious, right? So socially, you try to engineer that discussion to go, hey, you know, what is it that would make you click this thing?
Yeah.
Right? Even though, you know, with all best intentions, people will tell you, hey, don't click on everything you don't know. But there's always someone that will come up with something so catchy and you're just going to go,
they're getting way more sophisticated, that's right? For sure, yes.
So it's about, I think, the key message I tell people is, you know, that there's got to be robustness in how you look at things, right? You just got to, I hate this word, rigor, right? Because it's such a broad word that could define anything around the process and how you think. But in terms of being cyber vigilant, it comes back to, hey, understand that there are risks to everything you do, right? The most important thing to us is our personal information, right? And by the way, if it's important to you, it's important to the bad guys.
Yeah.
Right, because that's what they're after, right? So if you think of, you know, everything you do from going to the movies, like when you're picking someone up from the airport, right? You sign up to apps that tells you exactly when the plane's going to land. You know, it's all about data, right? So the integrity of that data is important to you, to the person you're picking up, to the people that need it to fly that plane.
Yeah.
Right? At any given time, if any one of those things break, then we're in a lot of trouble, right?
Yes.
And I think, you know, all it takes is one accident, right? but you got to put some mitigating controls around it. And for us at Thales, it for me personally as well, it comes down to securing it where it matters the most, right? And that's the data piece, right? If you secure that, you're a long way there in terms of securing yourself, right? Because as we said, humans make errors, but you got to make sure that you mitigate that.
Yes.
Right. And that's where the technology piece comes in.
Yeah, because I know often people will look at what to do after, say, a data breach has actually happened, but I think it's really understanding what to do before anything happens, that mitigation piece that you mentioned. Now, you did mention your current role at Thales as well. I'd love to talk through a little bit more about that and kind of what you're seeing within businesses you guys work with right now. Where are they in their cybersecurity journey?
You know what? It's a wide gamut, right? For most of the organizations that we work with, they realize that they are dependent on data. As I said earlier, it's quite important. And the key part of it is, looking at why is it at risk, right? For them, there's really only two things if you look at a very high level, right? There's compliance, which is what the government or industry standards tell you need to do. And then there's the risk of actually losing the data through cyber attacks and cyber breaches.
Yeah.
Right. So when we speak to these organizations, the conclusion we often come up with together, and it's not us telling them this, is, hey, maybe you need to look at processes to embed that security within your business.
Yeah.
Right. And what we do as Thales is help you realize that and make it easy for you to do. Right. So that's essentially what Thales does in 30 seconds in terms of the cybersecurity, data security piece.
Yeah. Do you think businesses and I guess leaders often overestimate how hard it can be to embed a sort of cybersecurity system within their workplaces? Can it be easier than people think?
It can be easier.
Yeah.
It can be easier.
Does it depend on data maturity and
depends on a lot of factors, right? Like organizational maturity, for example, right? Because the hardest piece is knowing where it is.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you don't know where your data is, then obviously it's going to take a while, right? But, you do have tooling out there that allows you to find where that is. And, we've got certain solutions that can also help that, right? We've made a lot of acquisitions recently to enhance our offerings around that piece to help organizations who say, oh, we don't know where it is. Well, that's fine. Let us help you. And we partner with a lot of technologies out there to enable that as well. So it's about asking the right questions of us and us asking you the right questions to make sure that we're going to the same journey, right? If we're going to that same goal, then we'll find a way to get there.
Yeah.
The complexity is always going to be there, but it's all about how we tackle it and how you break it down to little goals.
Yeah.
Like everything in life, right? If you want to get to the North Pole, for example, or the South Pole in our case, in the middle of Antarctica, you got to plan your trip, right?
Yeah.
And put little goals here and there to get there.
And you've also got to have a destination at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's funny, one of my mentors used to say that, cybersecurity to him was the brakes in a car. Right?
Yeah.
It'll enable you to actually go really fast. Right?
Yeah.
Funny, you go, you're the brake, but you're making people go fast. Like, well, it's because it allows you to stop and turn and move when you see something.
Maneuver.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the pivot motion that it gives you.
Yes.
And that's where I think businesses go, okay, cyber's too hard. Let's put it back. And I was like, well, no. If you embed it in what you're doing today,
it still allows you to be agile.
It allows you to be agile. You can actually move faster because once you get to that destination, it's like, I can release it now. I've done all the testing as I went there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Now, you've worked your way up the ranks to kind of get where you are today. Yeah. I mean, talk us through a little bit about that journey and what kind of a piece of advice you would instill in someone else that's kind of going through that journey now.
It's an interesting one because I did take a lot of turns through that journey, right? So, it accelerated fairly quickly for me when I was younger. Took on a couple of management roles then decided, hey, I need to take a step back and have a look at where I'm lacking and where I really want to go.
Yeah.
Right. So, anyone that I've spoken to in the past, I usually tell them, hey, just be curious, right? Have that guiding star that you need to go towards, but don't be afraid to take a step back and if you see that, hey, this direction's not going the right way,
you can reassess.
Have a look, have good mentors around you. Right? I can't, state the importance of that enough.
Yeah.
Right. Having good people around you that you can talk to and give you that right advice certainly helped me. So, So for me, if I'm, if I impart something to those listening out there who want to take that same journey, just be curious, have a goal, and surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah, and also in the cybersecurity space, it's just becoming even more imperative. So, I mean, it is a pretty interesting space to get into if anyone's thinking about.
Oh, yeah.
If you're at uni and you're thinking about what kind of field to get into, it's going to be a pretty booming area.
It is a great area, right? So there's always new things coming up, new technologies out there, AI, quantum. I've just used two buzzwords, so I said I wasn't going to do it at the beginning. But, artificial intelligence and the new computing technologies out there that just make it go a bit faster. That opens up a whole world of things, both on the positive side, new medical improvements, faster phones. We never know. We could have holographic phones coming up. Who knows?
Yes.
That'd be cool.
It would be very cool. I always thought we'd get the holographic watches, actually.
Yeah.
Well, it still might happen.
You never know. But, it also opens up that threat vector on the other side, right? Because, back in the day when we were driving to go from point A to point B, you had a book, a map. Now it's on your mobile phone. Right, so that is only going to keep moving forward.
Only going to progress.
Correct, and people are just going to keep giving up data as things move on, and more openings are going to come out for hackers to come in. Right, so cyber is always going to evolve.
Yep.
And it's an interesting space, right? Even in the last year, I was talking to a colleague, and he was saying it was probably in the thousands in terms of new vendors coming out there with new ways to protect things. When you think about that, you're like, wow, the scale is massive.
Yeah.
So, and then you translate it to, okay, why is there so many? There must be a lot more threats out there. So you're just going, okay, it's a big market. And anyone at uni that wants to get in, absolutely. It's probably, there's so many more courses out there that you can take.
Yeah.
That allow you to get a better understanding, better than what I had.
Yeah.
Which is, hey, here's an antivirus software. Go figure it out.
Yes.
Right. So
yeah, and we've spoken a bit about, I guess, emerging threats, but I want to talk a little bit about compliance as well and the compliance space, because I mean, how would you compare Australia's compliance regulations compared to, I guess, other countries? And are businesses kind of behind in that space yet?
You know what? That's quite topical, and it's something that pops up a lot. In terms of the compliance space, there are lots of regulations out there, and it changes per jurisdiction, right? And I think that's the biggest challenge that businesses are facing. Globalization, it's been going on for since the 90s, I'd say, or even before, right? And with the advent of technology, I mean, early 90s, internet was super slow, couldn't really do business.
Yeah.
But now it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And that's allowed us to stand up a shop in Australia and be able to sell to Europe, to the US in an instant, right? But what comes with that is, how do you take those transactions, right? The data that you take from people. So the EU has probably the strictest regulations around the world, right? The GDPR. The US themselves have their own regulations, which are quite hard to navigate for a small business.
And they're changing quite rapidly as well.
And in Australia, we've just released our cybersecurity handbook, right? Which I think is one of those interesting ideas, moves by the government that actually brings cyber to everyday people. It makes it easier to understand, right? And I was talking to an American colleague of mine, not even a week ago now, about it, because he saw it online, and he was like, wow, you guys have something like this that explains it. We don't even have that, and we have a myriad of compliance measures that we need to navigate. So I think that's a good step.
Yeah, to breaking it down.
Correct.
And there was one thing that you said that I kind of want to bring it back to, is that people will continue to give up their data. And I think it's an interesting sentiment as well, because we when we recently saw those major data hacks that were all over the news, the question was, how long should businesses be keeping someone's data? And I mean, what are your thoughts in that space?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
The Privacy Act, the amendment bill it was up for review last year, right? So one of the key things when speaking to industry about it was the consent piece, right? And within that piece, obviously, was data retention.
Yeah.
Right. So depending on the organization, that data retention could be 7 years, could be indefinite, 25 years. How do you monitor that, right? I mean, hospitals make sense for it to be 75 years even, right? Because they need to know what's happening with you, right? Or what's happened in the past, right? If you don't have that information, how do you treat someone effectively, right? So those are questions that's pretty hard to answer.
Yeah.
But I think you just need to put controls around that sensitive data to begin with. And you know what? It kind of lessens that burden to say, hey, I need to keep this data for X amount of years. That's okay. It's protected anyway.
Yes.
Right? So it comes back to what I was saying earlier, which is embedding your security right at the beginning. So if regulations change, or you got compliance requirements you need to meet, all you need to do is have a look at that compliance requirement and figure out how you're going to meet it to the best of your ability, right? It's still not set in stone as to what that consent piece is or how long.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's a piece of string, right? Depending on where you are, like I said.
And I guess every business is different. As you mentioned, hospitals will need certain data pieces for years and years and years. But does it come down to, I guess, individual enterprises and organizations having their own data governance as well? I
think it's a bit of both, right? So industries have their own requirements, right? So banking industry is probably one of the strictest out there in terms of, the data they collect, how it's protected, how long you have to keep it for, right? And then you've got critical infrastructure, same thing, right? So you do need that data officer, I'd say, within your organization, if you're large enough to go, okay, these are the measures we need to take based on the legislation that's out there, right? So I think you got to be driven by that compliance piece, but businesses have a say as well, right? So they can always, during those review processes, saying, look, I don't think this is feasible for you, Mr. Government, to say.
Yeah.
Right. So it's got to be, I think, a cooperation between government and industry.
Certainly. So sometimes isn't the one size fits all situation, is it? And look, we've spoken a lot about, I guess, compliance, but also at larger organisations and cybersecurity within those organisations. But how does an individual protect themselves in the cyber world as well? Have you got any tips and tricks in that space?
Oh.
How do you do it yourself? How do you protect yourself?
This is a funny one because I remember growing up, wife's going to hate this, but she was a massive Harry Potter fan, right? Still is.
So am I.
Right? So there was a character, Mad-Eye Moody.
Yes.
I think the words he always used was constant vigilance. Right? So, to me, that applies in this scenario that, you've just got to be careful, right? Because as I said earlier, people are willing to give up their data to make life easier, their life easier, right? But you just got to be mindful of where it goes, right? What you're giving up, right? And what measures you're taking yourself, right? For me, I'm quite paranoid. So I've got services that check whether or not, my name or my account's being used for a home loan somewhere else, right? And you can do that for free anyway, right? Once a year. But, it's one of those that for me, it's like, if that happens, a lot of things can go wrong. So let me put that insurance in place and go, hey, as soon as something happens, let me know. Because, and that's born from, to be honest, those breaches that we spoke about earlier, right? Lots of people are impacted. Yeah. I was too, right? So
same here.
The investment I made in terms of that credit company always checking made sense.
And I heard another tip from another cyber expert as well during that time, was that you should have multiple passwords.
Yeah.
Never have the same password across all your accounts. It's just one of the worst things that you can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's 101, right? Yeah. But then there's a lot of people that don't know that.
No, they don't understand that. I think unless you work in the IT space or in the tech space, even if you don't, it's still something that people don't get, that that you can make these tiny little tweaks to protect yourself.
Absolutely. And, the passwords themselves, right? It's easy to make them complex. Just put a number.
Yeah. Or an exclamation mark.
Or something, right? Just make it a phrase.
Yes.
A sequence of words instead of one word. And it's a lot harder to guess.
Yeah. Well, Eric, look, we really appreciate your time today on the People First podcast. It was fascinating to chat to you just about the cyber world and what you guys are doing at Thales as well. So thank you for your time.
No, thank you for having us.